Hello and welcome. My name is Sam Knowlton. This is the inLeague video tutorial series, and we're going to be talking about bracket scheduling today. We've got two brackets. We're going to do a U10 boys 8-team pool and then a U12 boys 11-team pool. But before I start, I want to say what might already be obvious, which is what is the difference between bracket scheduling and the regular inLeague game schedule? There's two big ones. The first is that the initial round of games is going to be populated from seed numbers that you've assigned to a team pool, which means even if you're scheduling all of the teams in a division, you do still need to put them in a pool because that's where the seed numbers get assigned. And that's what we're looking at right now. This is the team pool configuration for U10 boys. I've already created one pool that has all 8 teams in them. This is all demonstration data, so we're not seeing anything that's live, so we can play with it as we like. And then the other difference, of course, is that subsequent rounds, the matchups are going to be determined by the scores of the previous games. So as soon as someone puts in a score for the game, it will check to see if it can populate the next round based off of that score entry, and that will happen automatically behind the scenes as soon as the score is input, as opposed to the traditional inLeague game schedule, where you're typically doing all the matchups at once in a round-robin fashion. And so the outcome of one week has nothing to do with the outcome of the next. And in this bracket schedule, it's designed for tournament play. It doesn't need to be attached to a tournament. You can use it for really whatever reason you like. And as with most things, we've set up the algorithms for scheduling to capture the most common scenarios. It is expected that after you use the bracket scheduler, you're going to make some adjustments, maybe to game times, the field the games are on. It's going to give you a good first pass, but it's very easy to make adjustments after the fact. So we'll go through that as well. Finally, there's two different ways that it will create the game slots. And by game slot, in our inLeague terminology, that means the date, the time, and the place of the game, but not the matchup. So in the first example, we're going to create all the games as we go. It's going to create them all at once based off of the input that we give it for the dates, times, and fields we want to use. Excuse me. And for the U12 pool, we've gone ahead and created some slots in advance, and we're going to have it use those. And then in both cases, we'll be able to make adjustments afterwards. So let's start with our U10 boys pool. Here we've got our 8 teams, which means we're going to have a 3-round bracket of quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. As with any bracket, you want powers of 2 for a full or clean bracket. If you've got 4 teams, 8 teams, 16 teams, 32 teams, then all of the bracket slots will be filled. If you have a different number of teams, as we will in our next example, then we'll have a partially complete play-in round, but we'll get to that. So here we have a pretty straightforward example of 8 teams. We're going to go to our bracket schedule. But first, who can do this? Any division coordinator can manage pools for their division, but they can't necessarily access the bracket scheduler or the game scheduler. Bracket scheduling requires league-wide game scheduler permissions or program administrator permissions with a game scheduler subrole for the program in which you want to schedule the bracket. Let's go ahead and look here. So we're going to start in U10. As we can see, there's nothing here. And when I click create, it's going to give me a preview. We're going to give it some input, and it's going to show me what it would like to create. Nothing is going to be saved until we tell it to save. So we're going to start on Saturday, November 9th at 8 a.m. And days between rounds in a 3-round tournament, it's going to do its best to do the quarterfinals on the first day, the semifinals on the second day, and then the finals on the third day. Now, a lot of the times, tournaments happen on one weekend, so that might not make sense for the last round to happen on a Monday, but the last round is one game. So what we want to do is get most of the slots right and then adjust them afterwards, but we can also fine-tune it a little bit, as we'll see with our U12 example, if we've already got the games that we want. In this case, for U10, we don't have anything scheduled. Our U10 schedule is completely empty. So we've got 3 rounds, as it says down here. It's going to create 7 games, and we want it to use these 2 fields. And this date and time, what that means is it's going to start at 8 a.m., create 1 game on this field. In this case, our U10 games are an hour. That's the way we've defined it in our division setup. So then it will go over to F1, field 1. It'll create a game there. And then it'll go to 9 a.m. on the central soccer field, and then 9 a.m. on field 1, and so on. So let's go ahead and do that and see what happens. All right, this is still a preview. We still haven't saved anything. So let's just call this our demo bracket for U10B. We could also rename the rounds if we don't want to use quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. And here we can see the seed algorithm at work here. It always does the highest seed versus the lowest seed, and then 5 and 4, 3 and 6, 7 and 2, and so on. That algorithm is baked in right now. We know there are alternatives. This is a typical competitive seeding algorithm. If you want to do it differently, you can, of course, always change the matchups after the fact. But right now, this is baked into the system as of fall 2024, which is our first release of the scheduler. And where it says game for each slot, it says create because there's no U10 slots already created. So it's going to start, as we said, 8 a.m. on CSF, 8 a.m. field 1. It's going to go to 9. For the semifinals, it's going to Sunday. And for the finals, it wants to go to Monday. I don't really want it to go to Monday, so I'm going to tell it to create that last game at 2 p.m. on Sunday the 10th in the afternoon. And if it's taken the default game length here as well of 60 minutes, but we could, of course, change that too. So then once I click save, it's going to go ahead and create these games. So let's see what happens. Now we're going to go to our game scheduler, select that weekend of the 9th, and here we can see all the matchups are already done. If I wanted to move any of these around, move this one to 9 a.m., of course I could. And it will keep the bracket set up. The thing that's saved into the database that's important here is just the linking to the previous round in terms of the outcome of that previous game, determining the matchup for the subsequent rounds. If I change a game time and game field, that will not change. I can go back and edit the bracket later, but this is giving me exactly what I want, so I'm pretty happy with that. Here you can see that 2 o'clock game we put into. Now, what are these U12 slots? These all say TBD. That means they do not have matchups. I've already created these by hand in advance because I don't want the U12 11 team bracket that I'm going to show you in a minute to create new slots. I want to use the slots I've already made. A lot of times this will help if you have an irregular schedule, if you've got 4 games on one field, 1 game on a different field, and you want to be able to fine tune it in advance rather than doing what we just did, which is going to create them all in one big block and let me move them around as I want. Let's take a look at that U12 pool. You can see we have 11 teams. We've got A through K. Seed numbers have already been distributed. So what does that mean? Since we don't have an even number of teams, it means that we've got the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and the finals will all happen as normal. But the quarterfinals, as you'll see, they need 8 teams. So we're going to have a play-in round to determine which of those teams are going to play. So let's go ahead and do that. There's our U10 bracket. Change to U12. Here's our seed numbers. We're going to start also on the 9th. We're going to start at 10 a.m. because I've already created these slots, and it's not going to ever try and use a slot that already has a matchup. It only cares about slots that, excuse me, are TBD for the purposes of assigning an existing slot to a bracket that you're creating. So it would ignore those 8 a.m. slots anyway, but since I know all my U12 slots start at 10, I'm just going to go ahead and tell it that now. Same 2 fields. You can see here it says 4 rounds with 10 games. Let's see what that looks like. Let's call this our U12 demo bracket. We can rename any of the rounds, but U12 play-in round. And you can see it's taken the lowest seeded teams and put them in the play-in round. The highest seeded teams start in the quarterfinals. They do not need to participate in the play-in round. So this will give us the 8 teams that we need for the quarterfinals, and then the rest proceeds just like our last bracket did. Now, the other big difference here is you don't see that create option here. It's using games that we've already found. Now, it will give it its best guess. It's starting at 10 a.m. on the 9th, like we said, but I can choose any available slot on the schedule for any of these games. In this case, it's found games for the play-in round. It's found games for the quarterfinals. And then here in the semifinals, this is where that 1 day between rounds is not helping us because we don't want games on Monday. So we could create one, but we don't want it on Monday. but it's giving us some other options. It says here you've already got a slot on the 9th for that, so we'll just use that. It's the same thing here. And then this last one, let's go ahead and give this the following weekend on the 16th. And again, if I didn't want to keep that, it's trivial to change it afterwards. But here we're not creating any new games. We're only using slots that we already created. Hit save. We're going to go to our game scheduler. We want it to show the 9th to the 17th. Here we've got our U10, and here are our U12 games. You can see we have a couple left open because we had more slots than we needed. And that's always a good idea. It comes in a little bit less important for bracket play, but the coach conflict tool always likes to have an extra slot in a division. If you have a coach who's got more than one team, particularly across divisions, like it'd be unlikely you'd have someone coaching more than one team in the same division. But if you've got lots of divisions playing in a tournament, you finish all divisions, then you realize that 3 of your coaches have to be in 2 places at once. These extra slots are going to give the system a little bit of direction on where you want to swap games around so that that doesn't happen. But you can see it's used all of our the U12 slots that we made except for those 2, and that's fine. And then this is the final round here. And then this is essentially ready to publish. Just as with regular game scheduling, none of this is visible to the public unless you have published the division in the program that you're working on. All of the tools that you've seen in this video are administrator or game scheduler tools. So I still have to go in and publish these games if I want them to appear on the public schedule. But that is our bracket schedule. This is our first release of this system in fall 2024. Please let us know how you like it. There's a couple things that we're not trying to do, particularly with the amount of time between rounds. We're not trying to be all things to all people in terms of, all right, well, I've got 1 day between the first 2 rounds and then half a day between the rounds 3 and 4. Those types of things, they're so easy to fix afterwards, but we are interested in edge cases that come up a lot. We'd like to thank the tournament and game schedulers in regions 13, Pasadena, and 122 in Santa Barbara for spending a lot of time with us on getting this to where it is now. We're very pleased with how it's turned out. But as always, please let us know what you think. Send us your comments at support@inleague.io. My name is Sam Knowlton, and thank you for listening.